man, Kruse the head of Washington's public school system, he's begging Trump at this point. And I'm kind of begging Trump too. He is begging Trump to put his bullseye on Washington. So Kruse came out, and oh my God, are we going to play this? Yes. You've probably seen the clip by now. We haven't played it on the show because it came out over the weekend. So he comes out and puts out this video saying it's just not true that there are only two genders.
We have a civil rights framework in this state. It includes trans youth. This is a biological question. It is quite simply inaccurate to say biologically that there are only boys and there are only girls. There's a continuum. There is a science to this. There are children who are born intersex. There are children whose chromosomes and their hormones aren't consistent with their sex at birth. That's not a debate we're going to have today. I just want to remind you of our civil rights obligation. Our state laws make clear that students get to identify and participate in activities based on the gender in which they identify.
Yeah, and that's stupid, and it is a debate we're going to have today, Kruse Rekdal, whether you want to have that debate or not. As if, how disingenuous can you be? As if all of this has been about intersex children. Well, yeah, this isn't about just a boy who puts on a dress and says, I'm a girl and now I'm going to play against the girls. It's been about literal intersex human beings. Might there be, I don't know, 1 or 2 or 5 actual genuine intersex children in Washington's public schools? I guess so, but that's not what we're talking about here. That's very clearly not what we're talking about here, and he wants to confuse the issue. And we're not going to let him confuse the issue. But how dumb do you have to sound? And this comes after the federal government put out new guidance saying, this is what a girl is. This is what a boy is. It's really wild stuff. And of course, it's so crazy and the timing is so ridiculous that it has been picked up again by libs of TikTok. Said on social media, Washington State's education superintendent Kruse Rekdal claims it's quite simply inaccurate to say biologically that they're only boys and girls. And says Washington schools will continue allowing boys to invade girls' private spaces, homeschool your kids. And then, of course, the New York Post picked it up as well. Now, this comes right after Donald Trump, the governors, except our governor apparently, were in Washington, D.C., and he took aim, you've probably seen this clip as well, at the governor of Maine. Here is that delightful exchange.
The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way, that's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well, are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good. I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
Wow. I got to say that when I saw that, the first thing I thought is, do us next. Us next. Because the reality is that he has put a timeline on it. 4 states to comply with his executive order or face the consequences of that. We're all on the same timeline, Maine included. And Washington state continues to allow biological boys, as we know, to compete against girls, to invade girls' spaces, to be in girls' bathrooms, etc., etc., etc. And Kruse Rekdal is out there essentially saying that Donald Trump can put that executive order down, but that's not a law that we have to follow. Here's another clip from his YouTube video.
And again, as long as the federal government doesn't change their legal stance, interpretations from the U.S. Department of Education, they're not going to change us. Executive orders from the president that are outside the scope of federal law, that's not going to change who we are either. And I do want to remind you that even in the Dear Colleague letter that we got from the U.S. Department of Education that threatens to take away our federal money, they say right in it that they don't have the power of law to actually do that. They're trying to intimidate us into that, which we will not be intimidated.
Yeah, suffice to say, the letter didn't say that. The letter very much didn't say, we're just doing this to intimidate you. We don't actually have the power to do that. It didn't say that. But that's not the first time that Kruse Rekdal has said that. You know, these executive orders, he's doing things outside the law. He had said it in I think this is a tweet from a couple weeks ago, the 47th president of the United States is disregarding the rule of law by attempting to unilaterally impose an attack on the specific student groups that anti-discrimination laws aim to protect. The president's order directly contradicts state law. Our state law prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender identity, and we will not back down from that. And here's what I find just rich and fascinating about that. Who is the person who a year ago, almost to the day, said he would refuse to enforce the brand new Parental Bill of Rights law? Who is the person who said that unilaterally, to use a word of his? Kruse. A year ago, when a citizen initiative was passed into law by the legislature outlining a parental bill of rights so the state would stop hiding information from parents in schools, Kruse came out, absent any sort of ruling from a court, and just decided unilaterally that he was not going to implement the new law, the Parental Bill of Rights, because he, I guess, got to decide. As much as he's criticizing Donald Trump, saying Donald Trump is disregarding the rule of law by attempting to unilaterally do things, this is the guy who has spent the last several months doing exactly that, deciding on his own, as if he's judge, jury, and executioner, that an initiative signed by 500,000 Washingtonians, passed into law on a bipartisan basis by the legislature, was simply not something that he was going to enforce, and that he had directed public schools not to do so. So he has an issue now with Donald Trump doing exactly what he says. He says he's just fast and loose with the law. A guy who refused boldly, put out a statement, I'm not implementing this, until a real judge a couple weeks ago told him he had to, and then finally they relented. So a guy who thinks he is the arbitrator of what's legal or not. And here's how he gauges that. Do I agree with it? Legal. Do I disagree with it? Illegal. That's how he decides what's legal or not. I haven't said this before, I don't believe. It's time to recall Kruse. I think there's a basis for it. Certainly with his decision not to implement state law. He did that very publicly before there was any sort of court ruling. It is time to recall Kruse. It's also time for Donald Trump to make good on his threats to pull federal funding from states like Washington. Now, I don't want students to be hurt. I don't want education to suffer, but we already know education is suffering. And education is suffering because of this obsessive focus on political and social indoctrination. So if we can force our school district, by taking money away from them, to strip those things out of our classrooms and our curriculum, it's going to benefit everyone in the long run. And this is another time to plug our documentary, Operation Indoctrination. You can watch it for free across all of our platforms. It explains exactly why Washington State needs to be on Donald Trump's radar and why we need help here to get our public schools back on track.